What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Obviously, I don't have a camera today. I'm away from home. I'm recording this on my laptop. But today's video is going to be about what I think are the meta long-range weapons for specifically Rebirth Island. I love Rebirth. Rebirth's definitely my favorite mode right now. So I've played a lot of it, and I've got a lot of experience with all the different weapons. And I feel like Rebirth's unique in that you can kind of get away with a lot of different things, more so than Verdansk, just because of the fast pace engagements and the shorter engagement ranges. So it allows for a lot more flexibility with weapons, and you'll see that in the video today that I'm going to put a lot more weapons in like meta than I did for Warzone on Verdansk. So let's jump into it. As always, if you guys like the content, drop a like, comment, and sub. But let's get into the meta weapons for Rebirth Island. All right, so we're going to go through the same thing I did yesterday with a different tier list because some of the guns were missing from that tier list. So I have to give a shout out to somebody here. So FPS Krieger, he's been working with me to make all my thumbnails. He also made this tier list for me and made all these awesome images for the guns. He won't let me pay him, but I have to at least give him a shout out. He's been amazing, and the work he's doing is incredible. So Krieger, I really appreciate everything you're doing for me. But let's do this. This is the tier list for Rebirth Island specifically. So AN94 is the first weapon up. It's okay. I wouldn't say it's a meta weapon. Probably somewhere between competitive and viable. I'll just say it's viable. Again, on Rebirth Island, you can get away with a lot of things. AN94 is really good at longer ranges because it's really, really accurate. And obviously, Rebirth has shorter engagement distances. As a main weapon, so remember, this is just like your main weapon to pair with an SMG. So the AS Val is just not good for that. Even on Rebirth, it just doesn't have the damage range for that kind of engagement. So I'm gonna say it's still terrible for that. That's not what it's made for. It's made for almost being used like an SMG inside like 30, 40 meters. So as a main AR primary weapon, it's not good for that. Cold War AUG, even after the changes recently, I would say is very niche, not very good, especially on Rebirth. The AUG and the M16 are really good and dominant when they were high bullet velocity and controllable recoil because they have no damage drop off. So you could fry people at 100 meters instantly because there was no damage drop off. So that doesn't really matter as much on Rebirth Island. So that's why it's going to go in niche. It's not great right now still, even after the changes. Bruen. So Bruen, you can do something kind of cheesy that I had a lot of fun with. You can use Combat Scout FMJ on the Bruen with 60 round mag and snapshot grenades and restock. And that is a really fun build, actually. I'm not going to say it's meta, but with that build, since you're fighting in buildings and stuff so much on Rebirth Island, you can really use those snapshots and FMJ and Combat Scout to your advantage and just do some really cheesy things. And I don't want to popularize that because it's not cool, but it's fun. I'm going to say it's viable. C58 is meta, even on Rebirth. Has a pretty good recoil, pretty good TTKs. Just a pretty good all-around gun, especially because you can use that 45 round mag instead of the 60, since it shoots so slow, gives you better ADS time. So C58 is still very, very good. CARV still is not any good. I'd say it's a little better than the AUG for Rebirth Island, just because it has better TTKs, and a lot of your engagements are closer up in Rebirth, so that you don't need the range that the AUG has with a slower fire rate. You can just kill people a little faster with the CARV. AMAX is probably bordering on meta. I used all these guns, like I said. I did try out the AMAX, and it just felt really, really bouncy to me, especially compared to some of the Cold War alternatives nowadays. So I'm going to say it's competitive. I'd say it's between competitive and viable. But we'll put it in competitive just because it has good TTKs, and on Rebirth, recoil doesn't matter that much because a lot of your engagements are inside, 70 meters or so. Cold War AK-47, very, very good gun on Rebirth Island. So I'd say meta for sure as a main AR. You can build it with either the 3X or the 2SAT, like I talked about in my loadout competition video, which I'm still going to follow up on, by the way. I just haven't had time yet, and I've got a lot of other content I'm trying to make. So thank you guys all for submitting videos to that. It's been awesome. I've been enjoying watching those. Probably within the next few days I'll try to do that, but we'll see. So the DMR-14, with the changes that were made in this patch, it has better visual recoil. It still has low bullet velocity, but on Rebirth Island, the bullet velocity doesn't matter that much because your engagement ranges are so much shorter. You can get away with a lot of different guns. So I'm going to say the DMR is actually competitive now and bordering on meta. I hate to say that, and I hate to use the gun. I always hated the DMR meta. I pretty much used the CAR 98 throughout the entire DMR meta just because I couldn't stand it. Not because it was not good. It was just I just didn't mesh well with how I like to play. But it's very good again, specifically for Rebirth. It still doesn't have the bullet velocity for Verdansk for those long range engagements. EM2 is meta. Not much to say here. Low fire rate, you get the 45 round mag or the 40 round mag, and it does just as much damage as the C58's 45 round mag. Fantastic gun, works really, really well. Both the builds I've talked about in the past with the default optic and an airborne elastic, and the 3X also works really well if you just take off that airborne elastic for that. FAL is okay. It's just really hard to use. I would say between competitive and viable. I'll just do viable. It's not my favorite. It's really, really hard for me personally to use. But if you can control that recoil, it's pretty good. FARA is meta, just like on Verdansk. It's not as accurate out past like 70, 80 meters. I have a really hard time hitting shots out past that distance, personally. But that's fine. Like I've said 15 times in this video already, that's fine on Rebirth because your engagement ranges aren't that long. So definitely a meta weapon for Rebirth because it has fantastic TTKs. For a long range AR, your main primary weapon, unless you're playing super aggressive, I would not put the FFAR in meta. The recoil is just not good enough to be used as a main weapon, even on Rebirth. But it is really good TTKs, and it's not terrible in terms of recoil. I would say between A and B, so between competitive and viable. I'll do competitive just because it's actually a really good gun that not a lot of people are using anymore. Fin LMG. So I'm going to say this is the fin with the adverse barrels. So that's the barrel that gives the fin crazy fast fire rate and really good TTKs. I don't think it's worth using without that on Rebirth just because the TTKs are so bad of the normal gun. It's not really worth using. I would say fin with adverse barrels is viable. Just really good TTKs with bad mobility, and there's some other guns that are probably a little better. Scar 17, it's usable, but it's just the small mag and the Modern Warfare mobility and pretty bouncy recoil. There's just a lot of better options. FR556 is going to be the same as the AUG, basically. Not a whole lot of difference there. The FR556 is not as bad as people thought it was. Just because nobody gave it time to get used to the recoil. Either that or they changed the recoil. There's a chance they changed the recoil at some point, but you can hit your shots with it. It's not terrible. The Grau. So the Grau is pretty good in Rebirth. So I would say probably between competitive and viable. Just because it doesn't have great TTKs, I'm just going to say it's viable. But it's obviously really accurate, and you can do that iron sight build that gives you good ADS times and really good aiming stability. So it's not a bad option, but the TTKs just aren't there. Groza, they've really straightened up the recoil on the Groza, but still as a primary, I would put it between competitive and viable. It's not amazing, but it is okay. And they gave that sprint to fire buff, so that's really nice. But it's just not made to be a primary weapon, so I'm going to put it in viable. Holger, there's just not a whole lot of reason to use the Holger. The same thing I said in my video yesterday. I'm going to say it's niche/meme just because it's just not worth using compared to like a Kilo or a Krig or anything. So it's just not very good. Kilo 141 is actually really good on Rebirth. First damage drop off is out at about 80 meters with the Kilo. So probably 95% of your engagements on Rebirth Island are going to be inside that range. So you can really, it's a good gun on Rebirth. It really is. I would actually say borderline meta in between these two. Because of that last damage drop off and those long range engagements, I'm going to say competitive, but it is definitely borderline meta. It's very, very good. Krig is still meta on Rebirth, even though the TTKs aren't great. That mid-range TTK is exactly the same as it was before, from like 40 meters out to 80 meters, which is probably not a huge percentage. Maybe, I don't know. I'm totally making these numbers up, but just from my experience, from 40 to 80 meters, that's probably like 30, 40% of my engagements. Again, I'm completely making that up, but that's just what it feels like. M13, pretty good. TTKs aren't great. It's a lot like a Kilo. Again, I'd put it between these two, but damage per mag holds it back a little bit compared to some of the other guns. So I'm going to say competitive, but you can definitely use the M13 on Rebirth Island. This is what I like about Rebirth. There's so many more guns you can use just because of the way the map plays. M16, I think the M16 after the recent changes is a little bit better than the AUG. I'm gonna put it up with the CARV and usable. It's not great. It's actually okay on Verdansk now. It's just not amazing like it used to be, but it's okay. But on Rebirth, the TTKs aren't fantastic, so it's just gonna be usable. Modern Warfare M4A1. So this is the Kilo basically, except it has only 2 drop-offs, or only 1 drop-off instead of 2 like the Kilo. The recoil is a little more bouncy than Kilo, a little harder to control. So it's borderline meta, just like the Kilo, but I'm going to say competitive. I had a lot of fun using the M4 the other day. I was frying people with it. I used the same build, except I used the Commando foregrip as my RAM video yesterday. So take the RAM build from yesterday and put it on the M4 with the Scout Combat as well, but put the Commando foregrip on the M4 because the M4 is a lot more bouncy than the RAM. So you really need that Commando. M60, terrible. Zero reason to use it. M91, really no reason to use it over like a Bruen. The Bruen's actually pretty decent, but the M91, let's say niche. MG34, again, niche / meme. Sure, it can fry people, but it just has such bad mobility and bad reload time, and it's just not a great gun. But it'll melt people, that's for sure. MG82 melts people as well, as everyone knows. Super fast TTKs and decent mobility and decent ADS times for an LMG. So it's actually really good for Rebirth. It doesn't have very controllable recoil, so it's not great on Verdansk, but it's really good on Rebirth. So I'm going to say competitive, borderline meta, just like these other guns I was talking about. Modern Warfare AK. This is without the ammo conversion. I'm going to say it's viable. Pretty good. The recoil is bad for the first few bullets, but after that, it's not so bad, and it has really good TTKs. And you can put a tac laser on there if you use the last barrel, because the last barrel takes up the underbarrel slot as well. So that basically gives you an extra attachment, and you can use that for a tac laser and get really good ADS times. I would say try it out especially if you're a mouse and key player. Try the AK out, the Modern Warfare AK. It's actually pretty good. Crossbow, obviously that's a meme. It's okay, but it's a meme. Oden's actually okay on Rebirth. Has a really good TTKs, crazy range, so you don't even have to worry about extending the damage range very much because it already has so much damage range to start with. I'd say between competitive and viable. I had a lot of fun running it, but yeah, there's just some other guns. I'd say the Kilo and M4 are definitely going to be better than the Oden, so I'll put it in viable. PKM, again, unless I'm going to do a video on bullet penetration, I'm going to compare the PKM to the Bruen to see which one has more bullet penetration. Currently, I think they have the same. That's without actually testing it, so I just think it's worse than the Bruen. The reload time is going to be terrible. The mobility is worse. TTKs, I think, are a little bit better if I remember correctly, but it's just so heavy, and it's hard to use a heavy gun on Rebirth because you got to be zooming around the map and just have decent mobility. So I'm gonna put it lower than the Bruen. QBZ, I'd say QBZ is meta as well. It is very accurate. It has great mobility. Both of those things are huge for Rebirth. So I'd say it's definitely a meta weapon for Rebirth. Decent TTKs. But it's really accurate, and that's key for a long-range gun. The other crossbow from Cold War, obviously a meme. The RAAL is a meme. I don't know why they added it like this. It's literally just not usable in my opinion. Ram 7. So Ram 7, I made the video yesterday about it. Ram 7 is going to go in meta. I actually think it's very good. It has the best TTKs out of the Kilo M13 and M4. It has reasonably controllable recoil. I love that build I used yesterday. It really does fry. And like I said, it has better bounciness than the M4 for some reason. So you can get away with using an operator foregrip instead of a commando foregrip on the RAM and really give it controllable recoil. I have had a blast using it. It's one of my favorite guns to use in Rebirth right now. RPD is more of a Verdansk gun. It's really accurate, but it just has bad TTKs, so it would excel on really long range engagements. So that's not really what you have on Rebirth. So I'm gonna put it in usable, but it's not anything special. SA87 is okay, has pretty good TTKs, but it is heavy. It's an LMG, but you do get huge damage per mag, which kind of makes up for that. SA87 is a pretty good gun actually, so we'll put it in viable. Stoner 63, I would say is meta as well. So the Stoner on On Rebirth, you can put like a Raider stock or the combat stock on it, and you'll be zooming around as you're shooting people, which is pretty crazy how fast you move when you're shooting. So yeah, I think the Stoner's a very, very good weapon. You basically replace the underbarrel with the stock, and you get a pretty good recoil, crazy movement speed, really good TTKs, long damage range. Obviously, it's a little slower because it's an LMG, but it's still really good just because of those TTKs and the zoominess of when you're actually firing the weapon with the stock makes it actually pretty good. Type 63, similar to the DMR. They nerfed it big in this last patch, but it's still really good. It's very similar to the FAL as well. I feel like the DMR is in a little better spot than the type right now, so I'll put the type with just a viable ranking where the DMR is a competitive ranking. XM4 is fantastic on Rebirth. It's definitely one of the best guns on Rebirth. It's really good. It's just got good TTKs, good mobility, pretty good recoil. It's just kind of a master of all trades kind of weapon right now. It's very good at everything. Obviously, it's going to lose up close to certain SMGs, but it's a very good primary. I wouldn't say any of these guns are broken to put them in the top category. The closest ones to broken, I think, would be probably the Stoner. I mean, even that's a stretch. I don't really think there's any crazy broken primaries right now for Rebirth Island. But yeah, this is my rankings. Now let's go get into some recommended builds. So we'll do recommended builds for pretty much all of these top guns. All right, I've got meta builds for all 9 of the guns that I said were meta on Rebirth Island. So let's go through these real fast. C58, Agency Suppressor, Task Force, Barrel, Field Agent Grip, 45-round drum, Axial Arms 3X. You can keep the ADS times pretty good on the C58 because of this 45-round drum mag. That's the only special thing to talk about here. C58 has a low fire rate, so you don't need to use that big 60-round mag. AK-47 is exactly the same build. Same 45-round mag as well. Again, because of the slow fire rate, you can get away with that. My favorite EM2 build is Agency Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, Field Agent Grip, 40-round mag. Again, same reason as the C58 and AK. And then keeping the default optic and using Airborne Elastic Wrap to get reasonable ADS times, because the default optic basically works like a SUSAT. You can get really easy visual recoil with it, and I love that about it. You could potentially replace it with a SUSAT if you just actually want to use the SUSAT. I think you'd have similar ADS times there, so something to try maybe. The FARA, again, I have trouble with the FARA's recoil, so I basically do full recoil control build, Agency Suppressor, longest barrel, Spetsnaz grip, which is equivalent to the Field Agent grip. And then it shoots faster, so you kind of do need the 60-round mag. So this has a slower reload time and slower ADS times than the C58 and AK and EM2 because of that big mag. But it's still really good and has great TTKs. So the Krig build, Krig and QBZ build have the same recommended build for Rebirth Island, and this is something unique that I want to talk about real quick. So I do Agency Suppressor, Takedown Barrel, Field Agent Grip, Axial Arms, and 60-round mag on both of them. So the Takedown Barrel is the unique thing here. Instead of using the last barrel, just using the Takedown Barrel will give you much better mobility and allow you to have good ADS times while still having maximum damage range. Bullet velocity is not nearly as important on Rebirth Island just because your engagements are much closer range. So having better mobility, having better ADS times, and still having the same damage range as the last barrel is really nice. So that's what makes the Krig and the QBZ really good on Rebirth Island, is using this Takedown Barrel. You can really extend that damage range out, and you don't really need to worry about the bullet velocity as much. And they both have such easy recoil that you don't need that last barrel's recoil control help in order to use these guns. Ram 7, same build from yesterday. This is my favorite build for Rebirth. The unique thing here is the Operator foregrip and the Scout Combat Optic. So most people use a Commando foregrip on the Ram, but I think I actually like the Operator more. And on Rebirth, having this Scout Combat that's slightly above the zoom level of the VLK, making it basically go to independent FOV setting, gives it tons more zoom than the VLK, but not nearly as much as like the 4X on the Cold War guns. So it's actually really usable. And it feels great. I love this build specifically because of that Scout Combat Optic. And you can use the same thing on the Grau or the M4. Works really well there as well. Stoner build's also kind of unique. So we got Agency, Field Agent Grip, Raider Pad, Axial Arms 3X, and then 120-round mag. So basically what we have here that's unique is no barrel. I took the barrel off to use the Raider Pad. And this makes the Stoner have really good strafing speeds and really good ADS firing movement speeds. Makes it much more mobile. And removing the last barrel makes it much more mobile. 120 round mag, again, doesn't penalize anything and gives you a huge mag, gives you an extra 45 bullets. Agency suppressor for bullet velocity, damage range, and recoil control, and then field agent grip again for recoil control. Very, very, very good gun to run on Rebirth. A quick comment on the axial. You can try to use the 4X, which really helps with that visual recoil, like my video 2 days ago showed. But it's just a lot of zoom. 4X on Rebirth is too much zoom in my opinion, so I go with the 3X or the 2X even for the stoner. XM4, standard long-range build. Similar to the FARA, I have a hard time controlling the XM4's recoil for the first few shots. So I just do standard long range. So agency, task force barrel, field agent grip, 60 round mag, and axial arms 3X. So those are the builds for the meta guns. I don't really have anything else to talk about in this video, so I will just end it here. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative and useful. Try out some of these builds, especially the unique ones, and I think you'll find that they're pretty good actually. So I'll see you guys all in the next video, which will be out tomorrow. Have a good day, and I'll see you then.